Welcome to the Talking Shh podcast. That's right. We'll be talking about music, albums, live shows, bands we love, bands not so much. Again, we're talking shh. Join me, Scott Nokon, and Stephen James. Hey guys, we are back. This is Scott and Stephen, or Pierce Johnson, based on his little screen name, Pierce Johnson.
How about that?
Is there a story behind that?
Yeah. Is it really say that? Oh, you put that in there. That's pretty funny. It should be, who's that? The Irish actor, Pierce Brosnan.
Yeah, but I was going to start that, but then maybe Pierced Johnson, but it's back
if
to.
If anybody's watching this, put in the or in the comments what a gourmandizer is.
Yeah, we don't know what that is. We just hit record on this, and we're going to get to our topic in a second, but it's been a minute or two, right, Stephen, since we've been able to come together. So how are things?
Good. Work, a little bit of a illness, whatever. Things are good. Work is good. Just cruising along. Got to get some good, finally, good take on drums on a really cool track, which
absolutely
I'm pretty proud of. Sounds pretty good. I finally got to blast it in my truck full blast on the way home today. So I was like, yeah, it sounds good.
No, that's cool. Yeah. So what Stephen's talking about for you interested listeners. So we, and I can name everybody, but for this one, it was really, Stephen, Scott, and Bill that contributed to the music and the recording and the production and all that stuff. So New Nokon Unforeseen Circumstances, Volume 1, 5 new songs. As you're watching and listening to this, it's out now everywhere. You can stream. Pretty proud of it. Very proud of it.
Really
it's been a couple years since any new Nokon tracks got released back in 2019, Stephen.
Yeah.
As we're talking about, 6 years since I moved, 6 years since we recorded before this. This is
the last show.
Yeah, and the last show. So, probably no other shows. Who knows? Never say never, right?
Never say never.
But could it happen? Possibly. But again, I'm excited. I'm stoked for what we were able to do to come together. And there's there's a volume 1, there needs to be a volume 2. So
absolutely,
now that you were able to dial in, because I love your kit. It's the acoustic electronic. It's DW, right?
DWE.
So hence electronic, right? But in that the kit itself, now that you've been, and I wouldn't be able to figure it out. So you dialed it in, be able to record your drums, and then take all those as tracks, and then Bill BC, and with his mastery of the production dials and all that, was able to drop it in, and I love it. It sounds great. Again, I was listening to all that stuff today.
I was too.
Again, on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, Tidal, and again, everywhere you can stream. So we'll drop a link in here. It's one of our hobbies. This is another one of doing this podcast. There's a few other things, and we got a normal run of the mill. I don't know if it's run of the mill, but we got daily responsibilities and daily lives and jobs that we do. I was talking to somebody earlier about this, and I was reading a little snippet, and we'll get to our topic in a second, but since it's been a minute, I thought we'd catch up, Stephen. I was reading something yesterday that says, if all you do is wake up, go to work, come home, eat, go to bed, wake up, go to work, rinse and repeat. And I get it. So, some people, that's all you do. But for overall just balance, mental wellness, just keeping your S together, you got to have a hobby, right?
Absolutely.
It could just be scribbling on a piece of paper. You maybe collect baseball cards. Maybe you do puzzles. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Maybe you do music. You got to have something. And I don't think it matters what age you are, what aptitude you have, any of those things. Find something. Maybe you can paint. Pick up a basic starter watercolor kit on Amazon right now with coupon code. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, crayons and a coloring book.
Coloring book. They have adult coloring books, right? Yeah. So, again, do something. So, again, I think that was the reason why, because in this conversation, I was sharing the link, the Spotify link, and this was a work colleague. They're like, how do you have time for all this stuff? I go, well, if it matters, you'll make time. And that's really what it comes down to is anyone making excuses that they're too busy. My word is active. I don't have time for that. I got other things to do. That just means that you're not focused and you're not determined. I get it. There's only so much time in a day, but it's a little bit later here in Tennessee, just outside Nashville, where I'm at. Stephen's on the West Coast. But, we just come together and said, hey, let's get together tonight at this time. I eventually send out a link. My computer eventually boots up. We hit record and here we are. So I think all that kind of goes into just being free spirited, open minded, just going with the flow, right?
I will choose free will.
Talking about that,
Yeah.
so just announced this week is Rush, and the drummer's name, Stephen, I don't have that
Annika
memo.
Nillis.
Thank you. So I don't know the history behind her. I know just because you mentioned it that she's certainly been in the drum circuit for many years, and you had already followed her on socials. I did see a couple of videos. She certainly has got chops.
She's got her
So
shit together.
I think it's pretty cool. I also saw, and I haven't even looked, I've seen a couple posts from some individuals that are like, well, look, I don't know if this is BS or not, because I'm slightly out of the loop, slightly on this, where I just need to log in and see when the tickets go on sale. But I thought they weren't going on sale until like tomorrow.
Tomorrow at noon.
But there's been a lot of, even if it's just noise, they've already added 11 more shows across, I think, 6 or 7 cities.
Actually, they did post, a Rush official did post that they added more shows.
So I
don't know about the cities. I'd have to look, but yeah, they've added for sure.
Yeah, and it seems like what they're doing seems like that Alex Lifeson that too. Alex Lifeson mentioned that they don't want to do a lot of touring. So would it end up in the 6 or 7 cities? They're in LA, they're in New York, Chicago, and a few other places, that it's going to turn into maybe a a little residency, right? A mini residency in those cities, so they can kind of
cater.
Could they play 10 or 20 shows in each of those cities? Probably. I think the demand is going to be just phenomenal. I remember early on when we started doing this back in May of 24, way back when, with the covered wagon and the Pony Express was going on back in 2024. One of the bands I'd mentioned that I wish I'd seen and I'll never get to see is Rush. When I saw that post, I'm like, son of a bitch.
Yeah.
I'm going to go. And ideally, the ticket prices don't get ridiculous. A couple $100 a ticket's probably not a stretch. It's not being done for money, at least from the band. The band doesn't set the ticket prices, folks. Bands don't set the ticket prices. You have promoters and companies and all these other individuals that kind of get into that.
Inflation.
They get a portion of it, and they'll get a nice portion, but that's just how business is. So anyway,
real quick, it just makes you think back to when you and I were going to concerts in the 80s, where a ticket to Iron Maiden was $20. So they're making money somehow.
Yeah, money was still being made, and you get lawn seats at Irvine Meadows for like $8 or $10.
Yeah,
$12. Yeah, the money's being divvied up one way or another. Do things cost more now? Sure.
Yes,
but
sir.
In all that, I'm excited just to check out some of those dates, and they're not coming to Nashville, so I'll have to fly somewhere. But I already made
Wisconsin, they're playing.
Yeah, well,
not too terribly far.
No, and which I don't want to say it's odd that they're playing Wisconsin and not other cities, but
I think the reason why is that that the interview where they broke the news was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So they thought it fitting to, since they were there taking Q&A, they didn't play the whole snippet, because I just caught a little bit. It was like, oh, some new Rush thing. Let me watch it. And like, oh, this and that. And then somebody goes, well, how about, are you guys ever going to reunite? Anyhow, they kind of hemmed and hawed about it. And he goes, yeah, we are. And I was like, shut the
well, they bring it up almost like just, as a passing comment.
And the fact that they even spilled the beans on who's going to be the drummer. And there's so much back and forth. First of all, the internet and socials are just full of crap.
Yeah.
Everybody's got an opinion. It is what it is. It's not Neil Peart. It's somebody who's filling in the shoes, and talk about big shoes to fill. And I think she's dynamically perfect for this thing. It's the same thing where people were getting upset that Emily Armstrong started singing for Linkin Park.
Yeah.
Isabel and I went, and it just chilled. It was one of the best concerts I've ever seen. That's awesome. One of.
No, for sure. So, we could probably, and we will, we always tease a upcoming topic, and I think we have yet to do it, but it's probably fitting. excuse me, it's probably fitting that we talk about Rush, right? Kind of do
Yeah, I think
go through
so.
their history and songs. So we will do that, but tonight, and this will probably lead into a second episode in itself, just to get through it. But punk rock, Stephen and I, we you know we always kind of banter back and forth with topics, and we had yet to talk about this. We did an '80s themed, kind of more new wave ish show months ago, right? But I thought it would be kind of cool, and Stephen actually prompted this topic, so let's kind of get right into it. We're gonna go through just overall, like, where punk started, the overall purpose, the influence, the bands, the songs, the moments, really kind of where did our where yeah, that's it. Yeah, where it all began. I've only done a little talking today. I'm gonna start with that, kind of the origin, not the orgy, but the origin. There could be
Hey,
orgies
let's
going
go.
on, but the
That was what's
origin,
happening in the
where it
70s.
all began. And right behind me, if you can see it, I got some album covers. I got GBH. I got a
Hmm.
GBH. What else do I got here? I have a Broken Bones. I don't know if you can notice because it's kind of blurred, but
It's
the
blurry.
green tag is the Music Plus price tag. From
Nice.
the Music Plus, that
How much was it?
$4.99.
Let's go.
Yeah, that was the Music Plus in Cyprus that now is probably like a pet store. It's near
Or a
Bionic.
Starbucks.
Yeah. And then GBH, Midnight
Or a
Madness,
or a car wash.
and then Agnostic Front,
Yeah.
Unlimited Blood. This was actually on the oh no, if I'm getting away from the mic. That's the 40th anniversary. That was on the record store day from probably 2 years ago. I
Record
just,
store day.
compare and contrast. You got
Yeah.
Broken Bones, 4.99 when it came out. The 40th anniversary with 19 songs, expanded version. Sorry if I'm going away from the mic.
No, you can hear. We can hear. I
20
can hear.
24.99 there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Probably was $4.99 back in the day.
Yeah, probably, yeah, the same as the
Yeah.
Broken Bones. But I think those bands, which are some of my favorite, which is why I wanted to put them up there. That was weird when I touched that. Look, it kind of what hand do I have there? It's like you can kind of change. Look, GBH. Can you see the GBH there? Kind of comes through. I'm easily distracted this evening, Stephen. Um, but be it the Ramones, Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Damned,
Hmm.
what was their impact on creating this foundation? Highlight CBGB's in New York as the birthplace of American punk scene. In '76 was that kind of the year punk exploded. Some influences, kind of proto punk bands. I know you mentioned Talking Heads, which I think that's interesting, but the Stooges and MC5, that predates everything. And then some of the bigger tracks, Blitzkrieg Bop, the Ramones, London
Yeah.
Calling, the Clash,
I love
God
the
Save the
Ramones
Queen,
back in the
Sex
day.
Pistols. How much of an impact and influence from the early stages, and then where did it lead to when things eventually started to break out, in the later years, still in the '70s, but as you got into the '80s with kind of the LA and Orange County explosion. But before we dig into that, Stephen, since you prompted this topic, kind of, let's walk through some of the things that kind of got your attention and interest.
So when I first got into a band, I think it was considered speed metal. And one of the some of the influences back in the day were Metallica, Slayer, but there was also punk rock. And in those early days, I remember vaguely going down Sunset Strip, and somehow the punkers and the metal guys were all like brothers. There was no animosity because of punk, I
Mhm.
believe, gave us that ability to go, wow, these guys they're doing what they want to do. There's a quick little quote I want to read that I saw, which was kind of summed it up as a genre often characterized, excuse me, by raw energy, rebellious spirit, a minimalistic approach, significantly impacted the music landscape, emerging in the mid '70s. Punk rock not only revolutionized the sound and style of rock music, but it also influenced the broader culture and social movements, which I think is very cool.
Yeah.
And so it's the ways that punk rock shaped the music industry. And so the Ramones, I was more privy to the American punk rock, and then as things grew and got older, it was like, where did it originate from? Well, it originated, to me, it originated in England. So, but the Ramones were it for me. I mean, that was punk. And then as you get back into later years, there's a lot of bands that they call poser punk rock, which I still like these bands like Blink 182,
Mm.
Green Day, but when you go back to that raw, like the Clash, that was the first band from England that I was turned on to with the Ramones. So I mean, there's not a whole lot of bands that I know of. The newer ones that I like, another band, Rancid, which is one of my favorite bands as well. But it really developed quite a bit of mainstream to what music is today. We all talk about our dear friend who lost his life, Ozzy, who created the heavy metal genre. However, punk rock was a huge influence on what this movement was.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. And I want to hit on a couple other bands that were definitely influence to the overall genre. Again, I shared and I'll just hit on this really quick. In past episode, I shared a story where I knew of these bands. Be it like Black Flag and Minor Threat. Really
Yes.
was a big fan of Minor Threat.
Black Flag too.
And there was a buddy of mine in high school, so we were at the private Catholic high school in Long Beach, and then after school we take a bus down to his house before I'd either have to go to whatever before I went home or during football season or baseball before practice because we practiced like a few hours after school for some reason. Anyway, that's where I was definitely introduced to a lot more bands. He stretched the boundaries of the dress code at the Catholic school, and he didn't make it all 4 years there, and it's understandable. He ended up going to the like the public school down the
Prison.
street. I think he avoided that. Anyway, in that there was definitely a big interest to like I said, the bands behind me, Broken Bones, GBH, Agnostic Front. Your mention of metal and speed metal and thrash, which definitely I think had origins
That too.
from punk, right? When you look at like Agnostic Front and you look at a number of other bands, even GBH, they got more metal later on
Yes.
in their careers. And there was a big crossover. And as much as there was, and I don't know if it's like an official term, but it's definitely used the poser punk, which I like all those bands, the Blink 182s and Green Day.
Yeah.
It's
They're
same
good.
thing. It's like, were they part of the original sounds? Like, no. So if you want to be that way and state it, that's fine. But it definitely, I think, had that more free spirit. It was DIY before DIY existed,
Yeah.
right? It kind of spawned all that. But
Yeah.
definitely, seen a number of bands. English Dogs is another band that comes to light that I saw a few times. Olympic Auditorium, if you know the place, guys that are listening and watching this, that was in LA, kind of in downtown LA, near where the Staples Center is now. I don't know if it still exists in some form. They haven't had shows there for years, but I saw English Dogs and
Wow.
Dayglow Abortion and a few others.
Wow.
I saw Slayer there.
Gen X or the Germs.
I did not see those guys. Excel, which was kind of a hybrid between punk rock and thrash and speed metal. And then again, there was a ton of shows, GBH, The Exploited, and others that went through Fender's Ballroom that we've talked about, a
And
number of
played.
times. Yeah. So in all that, the scene itself, when you get into where I was exposed to it, Orange County in LA, it was strong. This was like in the early to mid 80s when I would see some of these shows, and these could be like VWF halls, right? They could
Yep.
be little, like there was a place was it San Pedro Balboa Theater where there was a number of shows they had there. Kind of, again, it was all just it still worked. Always a lot of people were showing, like, if anything, every show you ever went to that was kind of punk or thrash or speed metal, with the exception of that Overkill show I talked about before, it was sold out. It was just like, it was just
That's
this,
fact.
group of, there was a bond. It was kind of a family. There was just everything that
Yeah.
supported. Sure, once you started mixing in, you know, the skinheads, which was this whole separate group, right? Maybe proper punks, and anyone can go ahead and just comment and fact check me on some of this stuff because I don't know every subgenre other than what the music is. And there's probably some people we know, Stephen, that we could bring on that would give us a whole history lesson of punk,
Yeah.
which I'd be interested in kind of
For
going
sure.
beyond that. But overall, I think, with the DIY aspect, it also had this communal effect to it for the most part too, which was really cool. In that, I think when it comes down to it, you kind of look at, in as much as it was crazy in the late 70s and the 80s, the revival in the which kind of introduced the whole pop punk more, like the Green Day, the Offspring, Blink 182. You mentioned Rancid. You know, you got Dookie from Green Day selling
Yeah.
10 million plus records. I remember seeing them at their wasn't the first tour, but it was on the Dookie record. That was at the Velodrome in Cal State Dominguez
Wow.
Hills.
Old school.
Yeah, that was cool. And then in the 2000s and 2010s, where maybe it stretches the definition of punk, but I think it still had a feel to it, like Paramore,
Yeah.
Sum 41, Turnstile, you know, even Machine Gun Kelly kind of had a element of punk, you know, in the early 2020s as well. So
I think, and I also think, this might be a far stretch, but I think Courtney Love with Hole kind of had some of that raw edge as well. You know, you could say like Blondie. Was Blondie really punk rock? Well, she made it big back when they came out during that punk rock invasion thing here in America. That, you know, another one they're listening is the Runaways. It's like, okay, you know, maybe Buzzcocks, Patti Smith, The Damned, you know, these bands that have became probably got influence from the European version or the English UK version, I would say
yeah.
English. That made it fairly big here, especially Blondie. I mean, you know, the early days of Blondie, I've since I was first turned on to Blondie in the early 80s, I've always been a fan of hers. I've seen
Hmm.
them play a couple of times. Unfortunately, their drummer Clive passed away, but you know, I don't know if she's going to continue with but and then I real quick, this is really quick off topic. I just heard on the radio that the B-52s and Devo are playing together on a little tour, and I was like, that would be fun to go see.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'd love to see Devo and even B-52s just for the, you know,
The nostalgia version, you know.
exactly.
I
So
would like to see the Go-Go's also. Just
they're probably out there. They have those, you know, it's not when we were young though. That's a festival that's going on next weekend in Vegas. So there's, you know, Blink 182 and who's the other
oh, I didn't see that.
Panic at the Disco, which is not punk, then it brings up a lot of those 80s bands. So Steven, I'm gonna do this and we got a couple minutes. I was gonna run through according to Chat GPTs, but we only
Let's
deal
go.
with factual information, the top 25 punk bands,
Oh,
according
yeah.
to
Cool.
Chat GPT, right?
Cool.
Turnstile, based in Baltimore. Blackout, I saw them. They opened for Blink 182, their last two records. Check them out if you haven't. Turnstile. It's more modern as far as just, they've probably been around a good decade, but it's good. It's energetic. It's emotional. It's good stuff. Dropkick
Probably be a good,
Murphys.
good topic for a no consideration show.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
FYI. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No,
Go ahead.
no, no. So I right there, I think this I'm building out a playlist right here. Dropkick Murphys. I won't give the
I heard
city
of it.
on all these. I think everybody knows they're from Boston, right? You should. Replacements.
Yep.
Minneapolis Buzzcocks from the UK. Patti Smith, again, you know, she's kind of been touted as the punk poet because
Right.
the night, you know, you don't think of that, and that's been covered by a lot, but that definitely kind of origins of in punk just as far as just, you know, the rebellion, the merging art, feminism, all that together kind of lends itself. Operation Ivy, uh,
I haven't heard that in
short-lived
a while.
band out of Berkeley, but they inspired Rancid and a number of other bands. The Vandals, out of
No,
Huntington
frick, I
Beach.
forgot about them.
Yeah, fun. They're kind of the fun punk band,
Yeah,
but you know, still playing out. They do a lot of, I think they do a couple shows around Christmas time still at the House of Blues. Blink 182, you know, from San Diego, been around a good 25 years now. Fugazi, some call them kind of the post-hardcore pioneers. Their track Waiting Room is definitely Minor Threat, Out of
God, these
Step.
like right, all these bands that are just like, oh, it's like, oh yeah, I forgot about them
I
too.
love this band. Minor Threat's
Yeah,
probably my favorite punk band if I
they're
just, you
great.
know, put all that together. The Damned, again, from the
Yep,
UK, the Stooges from Ann
yep,
Arbor, Michigan, Iggy
yep.
Pop, right?
Iggy
No
Pop.
Effects, they just announced that they're gonna be retiring, so they're going kinda doing their last shows. Probably my top 5 of punk bands are the Descendants from Manhattan Beach.
Sure.
Um, Danzig, you know, from the Misfits and others. Definitely kind of the whole horror punk innovators for sure. I'm going to speed this up. Red, ska punk energy. Say that 10 times, but I know they're a big favorite of yours, and they just like
Pennywise would probably be in
just
there.
just great songs in there. Social D.
Yep.
Out of Orange County, The Offspring out of Garden Grove. Those guys went to my high school. Green Day from Berkeley, Bad Religion, LA. Saw them a number of times. Dead
Yep.
Kennedys, obviously.
Yeah.
Holiday in Cambodia,
Black
Black
Flag.
Flag. Hermosa Beach, right?
Yep.
Clash, London, of course, Sex Pistols, London, and the Ramones, according to ChatGPT, that was our top 25 bands of all time. To your point, Stephen, and we got about 15 seconds before we get kicked off.
It's going to cut
an
us
extra
off.
dime in the jukebox. Guys, we're going to be back for another show. We're going to talk more about punk. We're also going to do a playlist on the No Consideration Radio Show. Stephen, as always, I'm going to send you another link. We'll get back on if you got a few minutes.
Absolutely.
We'll chat more. Guys, until next time, see ya. Thanks again for tuning in to the show. We'll be back every week with a brand new episode. Make sure you check us out on Instagram at Talking Show, and also listen on Spotify or wherever you can stream a podcast. See ya.